And hi, everyone, and welcome back to Project 180. I'm Kevin. This is the podcast where we talk about project management stuff. Not to make a joke of it, but there's so much out there in terms of project management, product management that we want to talk about. Today, I've got an old and dear friend of mine, Lucy Rupert. Hi.
Hi.
And I've known you since we've been joking a bit pre as we were preparing for this, but since 1987.
Yep.
So we go back, but I don't think we've ever done any kind of professional collab before. So this is a bit new and unique. But welcome and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's cool to be involved in something that feels like much more legitimate than how I think of myself.
Oh boy!
Syndrome, right?
well, yeah, I think we've all got that. Certainly to some degree. I think I know personally, whenever I've changed jobs, and over the years I've bounced from high tech to non-for-profit to different organizations. For the first year, at least in each one, I feel like I don't know who I am or what I'm doing here. Mm-hmm. So is that something that's is that a kind of a common theme for you?
Definitely, and it's funny that you said that because I feel like it's made me realize I always feel like an imposter to some level. And I mean, part of it is because of how I came to be in dance, because I wasn't supposed to wind up here. There was a different life plan for me that I gave up. But I think it's also partially because in what I do, I'm constantly doing new things. And a lot of my major training has been in forms of dance that value not reproducing the same thing every time, but like finding new imagery and new ideas in each performance. So that's probably why I feel like an imposter all the time, because I'm never in a place of like expertise, even though I must have some expertise. Otherwise I wouldn't be celebrating almost 30 years as a professional dancer, but because everything's constantly new, it always feels like I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I immediately putting that through my lens, my professional lens, which is very different, I realize, than yours, but the whole notion of being agile, right? In your case, literal in some ways, but also more figurative in terms of how you're planning and how you're working, how you're creating things. In my space, agile is all about that constant communication, constant change, accepting, you've got a plan. Oh, bomb comes in, boom, like now you've got to reconfigure everything. There's this notion of flexibility and agility in planning, so nobody is stuck in that mode of constant repetition necessarily. You're not punching out the same widget every day. You're always building something new. So it's interesting to start there, because I think there's a lot of discomfort in that for a lot of industries, certainly in the not-for-profit or high-tech spaces where I've been, but similar in kind of the arts as well.
Yeah, for sure. I guess during the pandemic was when I really started hearing the corporate world use the word pivot all the time, and that's a dance term to me, pivot, right? But I've thought a lot about it over the years about why it bothered me that the corporate world was sort of like taking this word that feels like a physical language, and they're applying it to something that doesn't have that sensitivity that I think like the embodiment and self-awareness of movement like has naturally. And then I started to think about it and I went, no, it's a way of actually, I know this is something else that the corporate world has talked about and the not-for-profit world has talked about, but I found it increasingly profound the older I get, this idea of what are the values of your product or your, like for me, my art, and then how do I reflect those values in how I do the administration side? How do the values get embedded in just the desk work? That's part of it. And it's not just the language of a mission statement or that, but like, how do you put that in? And I thought, the pivot is something that we're actually used to doing in the arts because we're not for profit. sector generally.
Yeah.
Also, we are artists are marginalized people in Canada. Sadly, it's true. It's kind of a marginalized aspect. It's thought of it as extra. It's not
Yeah.
a fundamental part of society. And obviously, I'm going to argue against that. It's not how we should be viewing culture on the whole. But yeah, so what's come to me is that some of the key things in how I make my dances and how I perform my dances are collaboration, improvisation, and embodiment. And I think of that, if I think consciously about those three things, that is what I try to do in the administration side of it. So I think like there's a lot of correlations, and it's kind of a gift that the work I do is literally embodied. I have to use my body to do the things that I do. And I that's another reason why I think dance is really important for society broadly, because not everybody needs to be a dancer, but to experience improvisation, embodiment, and collaboration through movement, I think could help a lot of people in a lot of different fields start to do those things about the pivoting and the adapting to new situations. And potentially, if we get good at improvisation, we won't have that imposter syndrome following us around everywhere.
Well, you're making me think back, and it's funny because another old friend is Perry Rath, and I talked to him a couple months ago about this very topic, though, in terms of education. He's a teacher. He's an arts teacher out in British Columbia, the west part of Canada, for those people who aren't familiar with Canadian geography. And he was talking about, trying to train young people to be, more creative, but more adaptable is really, that's what it is. It's not just about how to paint a picture, how to create a sculpture, how to dance. It's about using those skills and adaptability and being able to apply that elsewhere.
Yeah. Most people are not going to be professional artists, and that is perfectly okay. And the value of arts education is exactly that, is like, it's appreciation for the art forms and that, but it's also learning like these skills that are built into the arts are skills for life as well. I had a wonderful experience during the pandemic. I was teaching dance online to a school, a high school in Toronto, and we had like a little Q&A after one of our sessions, and I said, ask me anything, I'll answer it. It was a Catholic school, so I was like, I'll try to be appropriate to your your school boards like stuff. I can't guarantee that I'll be 100% on top of that. But they were asking me about, none of them wanted to be dancers. And these were grade 12s, and they were freaking out about going out into the world after, at that point, I think it had been a year and a half of online school and, all this stuff. And I said, the thing is, what do you do in dance? You're constantly shifting your weight and adjusting how to balance and stay safe and not fall over. And if you wiggle or wobble, you adjust and figure out how to just roll with it. Like sometimes literally, fall, you gotta just keep rolling with it. But sometimes, dance is just constant adjustment, and that skill is embodied in you. So it's in your wiring. It's in your brain to know how to adjust to things. And there's no reason why your brain, your body would suddenly cut that skill off just because now it's an intellectual problem, not a physical problem. It's already in you. So go out and just trust your dance training is going to actually support your ability to cope with unsteady ground.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine anyone during that period, but especially young people, students, would have felt very insecure about pretty much everything. Like the whole bottom kind of fell out of everything for a couple of years. So I can imagine that question coming up, and a great answer, because the whole key to survival for anyone, anywhere, any species is adaptability. So that's the core value that we're really talking about.
Yeah, it's so true. And the thing that was like kind of the most surprising to me in that moment is I didn't anticipate saying that. when they asked me that question, it just came out of me, and then it actually helped me. I went, oh yeah, hey, I can do that. I have those skills.
Yeah. Yay, me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if we can pivot. If we can go back to you're talking about the administration stuff. In terms of you're talking about, the mission, the vision of like Blue Ceiling, your dance company of 30 years, and how that helps you make decisions and plan things for your work. So in terms of project management speak, to me, that sounds like I'm referring to the textbooks. That's like integration management. It's scope management, right? It's those kinds of things, but really it's about aligning with your values and aligning with your own schedule, your own time management as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about. I know you're working on a bunch of stuff. Like you're creating pieces, you're working on grant applications, you're obviously when a grant application is successful, you have to then report back on whatever metrics you have to report back on. Can you walk us through a bit of what you've got on your plate and how you balance it all?
Okay, I can use right now as an example because it's a particularly crazy time right now. So right now I'm dancing for another company because I freelance as well as dancing in my own company's works. So there's that. Luckily, there's not a lot of administration there. All I have to keep on top of is like invoicing on the right dates to get paid on the right dates. So
Right.
that's a calendar issue more than anything else. But I will say that one of the big challenges is that rehearsing is exhausting. It's really tiring. It's a lot of the work I do is like physically tiring and also mentally tiring because it requires a lot of little tiny instructions and little tiny attentions, as well as like the bigger. I'm jumping and I'm running and I do that for 4 hours straight and then want to sleep.
No thanks.
Yeah. But then there's the rest of life, right? There is the other 4 hours of the workday that has to be the grant writing. And right now is a particularly crazy time for most grant writing stuff, for lack of a more eloquent way of putting it, because there's a lot of deadlines between the last week of March and mid-April. There's a lot of deadlines between federal and provincial arts councils. And some of them are not hard deadlines. Some of them are just kind of like, where you can apply anytime, but at this day, we're going to take everything we've received for the last 3 months and evaluate them.
Right.
So so that is, and it inevitably always happens at the same time as when everybody is in the studio working is usually February, March, April. And that's when all the grant deadlines are.
Yeah.
And I don't say all artists, but in dance, there's a lot of people who are like me, where they have their own projects and they dance for other people. So there's like this constant rolling of managing the physical exhaustion, which is also mental exhaustion, with I actually still have to write a grant. And for me, there's also an added layer. Right now, I don't teach regularly. I teach in like little pockets, but next week I will be teaching every morning and then rehearsing every evening. And then I also have 3 grants due next week. So there's like that, but I guess, it was easy when I was younger because you just have the boundless energy and no kids.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a little bit harder, but I'm more used to it. So like there's the advantage now of experience that I can write grants a bit faster than I used to be able to because I have a more experience writing them. What else? So now I also have to do lesson planning or class planning for those workshops, and they're not for dancers. So it's for dancers, actors, like performers of all sorts. So it's like it's kind of a different model that I have to think of. So it's like balancing that. But sometimes, I mean, I'll just say like I am schedule queen. Like I usually schedule my whole day out in like tiny little increments so that I know if just give myself half an hour chunks to like get things done. And quite often that's all I need. But if I were to sit down and say, you have to do this, it would take me hours to think. But if you only have half an hour, I can get it done well enough.
The focus comes when you've got that kind of deadline, right?
Yes. Yeah. It definitely helps. I'm trying to think what else. But there's also the future planning. Like I'm going on tour with the company that I'm dancing for, so I have to like be planning for what do I need to do before I go, so that I'm not having to worry about accomplishing it while I'm in Vancouver. And then I get back and I have 2 days off, and then I start on another piece with that same company, but remounting a totally different piece and going to Guelph with it. And then I have a residency outside the city right after that. And then I'm going to perform in Waterloo at the Perimeter Institute. So, and these are all different pieces. So it's like trying to like figure out that's the main thing. It's the feast and famine in the arts, because then the summer I seem to have nothing.
Right.
So it'll be like the panic of trying to come up with things that will help pay all the bills in the little pauses that happen there.
Well, that's interesting too. I mean, for many reasons, but in terms of planning, and this is a theme for all my nonprofit experience, right? Mm-hmm. And regardless of I guess genre or oeuvre of that particular nonprofit, but it's that feast or famine concept, and just the work jacks up, for a couple of months because there's applications, there's grants, there's deadlines, and then it can just drift, and you're maybe in maintenance mode, or you're in reporting mode, or you're developing next day. It's very hard to do long-term planning. And you, like Blue Ceiling company, the company's been around for 30 years.
20.
Okay, sorry, 20.
30, but the company's 20.
20. So my math was wrong, but still, that's a long time. But that's like to go through that same pattern. Like what have you kind of picked up along the way in terms of some advice maybe, or just things that you picked up that make that a bit easier? Or is there anything that makes it easier?
Well, I like that's tough for sure. I used to have like a side job as a part-time arts administrator. So that was usually, like 10, maybe 15 hours a week, really flexible work. But a lot of those jobs have disappeared.
Right.
Now, like all the arts admin jobs that are part-time, I'm sure you know this little trick, the 30-hour part-time job, which means it's a full-time job, but they don't have the money to pay you for. It's a not-for-profit, like it's like a log jam that happens for so many companies. So right now I really need a little extra job on the side, but I can't find anything because I'm dedicated, maybe I don't know. I'm dedicated to keeping on doing this because I can keep on doing this, and something is telling me that I'm supposed to be doing it right now. I'm supposed to keep dancing. I will say one of the things that I just recently decided to do, partially because of the 20th anniversary. This is 2024 is the 20th anniversary year for Blue Ceiling Dance. And I have the arts funding is really, really messed up in Canada right now. It's really bad. It's like a 16% success rate at the Canada Council, which is abysmal. It's abysmal. So a lot of my projects are sort of in limbo because I don't have the funding to go forward with them. So I'm trying to think about, and this has been really helpful. Think about how did I start out? Because when I started out, I wasn't getting Arts Council funding, because you have to sort of get going a little before they start to back you, right?
Yeah.
And so some of it's just been like taking things back to like a simpler format. So I've been doing performances in a local community center, and just having them be pay what you wish. If you don't want to contribute anything, that's okay. Just come and see a performance, because that's the ultimate thing. I need to make a living, but I also I could make a living doing lots of other things. So if I'm going to do it as a dancer and as a choreographer, I should be feeling like that is the point. The point is to share that somehow.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to go back and think about like more, how did I get things done back in the early days when there wasn't any money. There wasn't any grant money. And that's been helpful because some of it's not applicable anymore. Things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. You know, renting a space casually for a one-night performance is like 14,000 times more money than it used to be.
Right.
But it's like the mindset of the, like, in a way, I think of it being like, you know, Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney going, let's make a show in the barn, you know, like, just like, let's just make it happen. Like, how do we just make it happen? And so it's been that, again, it's kind of that idea of like improvising and collaborating, is not being afraid. You know, there's like this such pressure, I think, in the arts to legitimize yourself by working in a way that is rather capitalistic.
Mm-hmm.
You have a product, you got to sell it, you got to make the money. Making the money proves that you're worthwhile. Yeah. And so trying to think like, yes, I need money to pay for the things in life, but there's other ways of making, like, not feeling bad if I barter with another company. This happens a lot in like promotional stuff, cross promotion all the time. We just like, you plug my event, I'll plug your event. We'll like celebrate each other, kind of thing. And also, could I borrow your dance floor, and in exchange I'll clean it. Like we once, like we cleaned it. The dance floor was in such bad shape that we cleaned it and found a roll for it, so it wouldn't, when it was in storage, it wouldn't be creased and folded. It would be, you know, in this nice so figuring out the ways you can like get all those things without the resources that you actually need. What are the alternate versions of those resources, I guess? I feel like I went way off the question you asked. It was something that was right in there.
That's fine. No, it's interesting because again, I mean, what I find most interesting about this is what I wouldn't necessarily expect. I would, because I'm certainly, I've known you a long time, and I'm very familiar with, you know, the industry in general, but those who aren't might not see the parallels between, you know, it's community building, what you're talking about, right? It's building this community infrastructure one way or the other that supports each other. And we've got a little bit of funding. How can we spread that around a little bit? How can we share that? How can we, you know, solicit help from others in the community, so the whole community elevates, not just a participant? Right? It's very similar. Like my current, you know, 9 to 5. I'm working with this company called Pinax. We're in the Web3 space, and it's a burgeoning technological, you know, it's blockchain, it's Web3, it's all newfangled, right? And there's all these companies, but they're not really competing. They're doing slightly different things, and there's some competition, certainly, but more, it's like, okay, we're doing this. What can we do that builds on that? That's going to get us both more of an audience and stretch this out. So I'm finding that very interesting, that there's so many parallels in industries that are not, maybe, air quotes, mainstream, right? It's not like Microsoft. If Microsoft wanted to open open an office somewhere that was exclusively for development of dance and sculpture, whatever, they could do that, and it would be hugely successful. They're not gonna, because that's not their core business. But you know, they support things different ways, but that's a whole other schmear. But I think, you know, in terms of just developing the community and then supporting each other, that's really what you're speaking to. And I think that's the common thread between a lot of industries, not for profit or even for profit, when they're trying to build something new and interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's actually a way, like, obviously, it's a way to build a healthier society too, because there is a thing. I can't get too sociopolitical about these things because my brain isn't in that place, but there is this dominant thing about, like, I worry about the commodification of artists right now, like the literal commodification of artists, not of their work or anything like that, but just of themselves. And I think there's like, this is something countercultural to that, was this idea of community building and I've said it for a long time, because I think, because you've worked in the not-for-profit sector, there can be this scarcity mindset that the pie is this big,
Yeah.
and you have this big a piece. And if somebody else comes along, that means your piece is going to get smaller. And I've always thought that doesn't make any sense, because if we actually work together, the whole pie gets bigger. Right.
That's exactly the same analogy, and maybe it's not that uncommon anyway, but I've heard this in our meetings in the Web3 space. It's the exact same thing. The pie is getting bigger, so let's not all worry about that one little sliver that you're focused on. Worry about the pie.
Yeah, and there was a good chunk of time in Toronto where that there was a big shift. Like when I first moved to Toronto and started dancing, it definitely felt there was a pie and people had their slices, and you had to, like, gladiator battle it for a slice. Yeah. And then it got a little bit better. Things started to change. There were some, like, particular people in the community, like leaders, who started talking about the difference between scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. And like I think there were some, like, books that were written on these topics, and the arts community, like, ran with it, but it worked. There was a big change in the community for like a good 10, 15 years. It felt like people were really like, how do we support each other? How do we, make room for each other without feeling threatened that it would cost us our place, right? But the pandemic has definitely, it's I think these things have split again. Like, we still are really trying to support each other, but there's also this, like, absolute fear of being canceled, fear of not fitting into the right parameters for funding or presenting, and things like that. So I feel like it's sort of divided again. And even though there's, like, this deeply compassionate thing that's arisen from the pandemic of wanting to help people feel, I want to help you, but I need that job because I need, I need to keep surviving. And it concerns me a little. And it's something I've been, thinking about also, because, when you feel like a constant beginner, you often, like, I don't think of myself as having any kind of expertise that I might be able to share with a younger generation. But I'm starting to think about it, because I'm like, if I feel this passionately about this, maybe I should be not so scared to try to be an example and try to talk about it with the younger artists who are coming up, and about how to carve your place without excising somebody else from the picture.
Well, it's interesting. Like, and I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic there too, because it impacted everything, regardless of who, what, where. But in any industry, like, the economy's been rougher since. People are, inflation's gone up, which means there's less money to go around for everybody. So it's kind of reintroduced that. It's forced a scarcity mindset on to a lot of industries, yours, mine, others. So it's kind of, it's just the environment has shifted, where everyone was building, like, back to the awesome pie metaphor, that was, the pie was growing, but now that pie shrunk. And you've got all these people going, wait a second, and now you can kind of see that mood would shift pretty quickly, which is unfortunate, because it sucks. There's people who are not going to be people who may be reliant or became to expect a certain amount of support from either a funding body or the community, that shrunk, and it's harder to move forward with things, which is and so what you're speaking to in terms of people trying to adapt to that. Some people, they're going to come into it, that's the world as they know it. So they need to know that there is an alternative. It's just maybe going to take some time to get there, which is what you were describing, 15 years ago, when things kind of grew, the pie grew, and everybody was a little bit more collaborative. Now it's a bit more competitive.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like how you put that there's, there's, like, a generation of people who come up that this is all they know of the professional world or of work life. That's all they know. And I feel a responsibility to sort of be able to say, but back in the old days.
I don't know about your kid, but as soon as I say something like that, boom, ears shut off.
I definitely had that with with our kid. He oftentimes, he's like, well, you don't know what it's like. We didn't have bullying. I'm like, are you kidding? We had bullying, and the administration at the school didn't do anything about it. Like, now you have rules and codes, and people can be, expelled or suspended. But no, back in the day, the principals were just like, I don't need another problem, please. Yeah, there's that. I mean, I worry about that too. It's partially a pandemic thing where so many people who are, for us, the Gen X people, we got squished in the middle. And now, as some of the people, it's happened in the arts anyway, some of the more senior people during the pandemic decided, you know what, it's time for me to step down, creating spaces but the Gen X people who are we're still not able to move into those positions because they're leapfrogging behind us and grabbing the generation behind us to put them into leadership positions. And I worry about that too, because I don't know if it's like this in other sectors, but certainly in the arts, I worry about the loss of the continuum over time, because I feel really lucky. I work with dancers who are like a generation younger than me, and I also work with dancers who are a generation older than me. And sometimes, like at the last big show I did with my company, we had an age range from 25 to 61 in the cast.
Yeah.
And I think that's really special because it created like this ability. The 25-year-old and the 61-year-old got to dance together, and they didn't know each other before. So like, I worry about the loss of this generation being like, if you remove all our knowledge and experience from the continuum, these people are retiring, and sorry, some of them are passing away, which is really like sad and upsetting. These people coming up have nothing. They're going to have nobody to look to for guidance or collaboration in some way. So I worry about that. I'm sure it's the same in the corporate world too. I mean, I hear from my sister-in-law some, stories about the plethora of 30-ish aged MBAs that she has to deal with that are just obnoxious because they've never had somebody to switch back from the other.
I can't speak to that, but what you're saying though in general, I think is apropos. Again, tech industry is similar in that there's corporate knowledge, right, that isn't always preserved well, and that can be project level. We worked on this thing, it was successful for these reasons, it failed for these reasons, whatever it was, and very few places are good at recording that. And they still don't know when someone does retire or they move on to another role, or they just go for whatever reason. That's when they notice, oh geez, we got to really fix that for next time, because if Bob retires, we're screwed. And then Bob retires, and then they still haven't done the thing that they wanted to do to preserve that knowledge. So it's a constant battle, I think, in a lot of industries, is trying to record that. But it has to be a practical way of doing it, because you can't just have somebody record their voice talking for 10 hours and like that's unwatchable. You can use AI to distill it or something, but still it's not the same. So it's hard to determine what that knowledge plan should be.
It's so true. It's like you need an archivist in a way, somebody who just like I don't want to say curates, because that's like such a buzzword, but like figures out what's important information to hold on to. I think it's probably there's like a good there'd be a good model in science somewhere, because like I'm sorry I over spoke on you about like how important it is to document the failures, because that's where the real learning can come from, is like, why didn't something work? Why didn't it work? And dig in. It's like there's so much to be understood there, and science does that really well, in terms of like, maybe not in publicly, because they always want to say we did this, it's great, but but their records have to include what didn't work and why, or hypotheses as to why it didn't work. And failure. I've talked to a lot of scientists, especially in the last 10 years of my career. I've talked with a lot of scientists, and they're like, failure is always the place that's the most exciting, because then when you fail, you know, that's one possibility that's you can cross off the list. That did not work.
Yeah.
So now the list that was 500 is 499 things, you know, like they can start to figure it out. And it's important to keep track of that so that you don't repeat the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll use that as an opportunity to go back. Daughter's leaving. Bye. Go back to the imposter syndrome where we started, right? Because that what better solution for the imposter syndrome is knowledge and experience, and wrapping that together, and being able to acknowledge, and when things didn't go well and when things did go well, and using that as a way to communicate that with others in your industry or within your organization.
It's so true. It's so true. I've been writing like this series of essays about creative process, and I tried to be like, well, you know me, I can't help but be like a little bit over personal about things. And I've been writing a lot of going through my notes from rehearsals, like notes that I've taken about, especially about solo rehearsals, because I'm like super critical when it's just me alone in a studio. And what I'm finding really interesting is when I've said that was a stinker of an idea, don't try that again, you know, like, and like going through and finding, well, what did I really not respond to? And like, and then trying to be also reflective about it and say, well, what else was going on at that time? Was it really a bad idea, or was I just scared of the idea, or was I tired? Was I hungry? You know, things like that, because, and it's legitimate, not just in dance, but in everything. When you're tired and you're hungry, sometimes you make really stupid decisions, or, you know, that we all do it. And in the arts, I guess sometimes we're allowed to like admit to it more than other fields, where you like, your body is your instrument. So when your body is, you know, depleted in any way, you can acknowledge it. But I have been finding like the language I use surrounding what didn't work is really funny and interesting to dig into. I don't know what it'll amount to. I mean, there's part of me that's like, I should make a piece eventually, a piece of dance that is just all the things that I thought were really bad ideas, and see what happens.
Can you please call it Risk Register? Because that would be a nice tie-in with the project management as well.
I like it. Yes.
So with that, Lucy, maybe we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you so much for dropping by the show.
I hope I said things that were interesting and useful.
I think you did. And again, it's really nice to see all the things you're working on, but also how the lessons can be learned. And that's the whole theme of why I wanted to start having conversations about, you know, project management with people in different industries, because everyone has the same challenges. They might be labeled in a different way.
Yeah.
The experience is a little bit of a different flavor, but it's usually the same challenges across the board. So so thank you for getting into that conversation with me today.
Well, thank you. It's also really lovely to sort of frame what's like just like kind of, you know, business as usual for me in a different way, and see how it, like thinking about how it relates to fields outside the arts, and yeah, I appreciate expanding my brain that way too.